A very interesting panel as always. I think more importantly, I think this panel pretty much lives the mantra of targeting the consumer of tomorrow, today. So be it in terms of brands or in terms of distribution that a couple of them do out here. And let me just start the ball rolling with the most powerful truth which is there in the markets today, and I'm sure everyone knows about this. So Uber owns no vehicle, Alibaba has no inventory, Paytm is not a bank, and so on. So the challenge is really about looking at what really is this new world shaping out to be. Since centuries, and I've looked at it for a couple of decades, but the fact is that the most complex supply chain management in India, which was about OEMs, distribution, dealers, retailers, and so on, is pretty much getting completely smashed because of the interface which is now being available. So the challenge is really about is going direct the new moniker? And if going direct is the new moniker, then how do brands really provide the consumer experience which possibly it did a few years back? And what is the convergence that one's really looking at? So we'll just roll with that, and I'll start with Asif. It's interesting, Asif has just redesignated himself as the consumer care associate from being a CEO. Quite strange to do that. But this reminds me of what Nagesh did of Shoppers Stop. He also designated himself consumer care associate. Interesting to me because what it shows is the level of commitment for the organization head to really look at a vertical which is consumer care. Is that vertical large enough for the CEO to really focus on it? Second, is that also the biggest pain point for the organization? Given the fact that if the CEO really wants to handle that role, it possibly shows that this is also the biggest challenge that the company possibly faces. And the third is possibly about looking at the fact that the entire organization has to be driven by that vision of customers first. And if that is the orientation, it really needs to start from the top. So Asif, why customer care?
Hi guys. I'd like to just take you behind a little bit before I concluded to what he just said. What he just said is because Mr. Nagesh happens to be my mentor and I just cut copy-paste. Because I want to prove that what Mr. Nagesh has done is a splendid job, and I don't know how many people in this country can become Mr. Nagesh. Anyway, 10 years back, I went to Dubai and I met the CEO of Landmark Group, Mr. Jagtiani, and he said that we run a mafia. I said, how come you run a mafia? He said, yeah, we run a mafia. You see that we have got so many brands that no mall can survive, nobody can survive without us being there. So we get a very good deal. We get properties, the best properties, and we get it at a very throwaway prices. And he told me everything which made absolute sense to me. Maybe it was too new for me 10 years back. India had not even matured as a destination for retailing, but I absorbed everything, and it helped me a lot. Today it also helps me a lot. When people talk about customer care, I think what people over here generally, I think, believe that customer care is all about juta toot gaya to kya karna chahiye. Okay, I had a complaint, so what should I do? And if it is not good, then what? I'd like to just correct where I come from. For me, consumer care, customer care means I want to reach out to her everywhere. We are available in 450 point of sales. We have been opening up one point of sale every third day in these tough times. But again, we took a new approach. Like everybody, मैं आज से कुछ 5 साल पहले की बात बताऊंगा. When I met any retailer, he had a bag in his hand and a mobile to his ear, and he said, like, I've just signed up 100 stores. I've just signed up 60 stores, 70 stores, and we never did that. We took a route, we took our model, we went to shop-in-shop model, and we did it very successfully. We've got 450 shop-in-shops compared to 16 standalone stores. So we reached out to the end consumer, and we understood that our vision, our mission is affordable and disposable fashion. The panel before here, everybody was talking about affordable and disposable fashion. But for them, Ms. Lacoste, like our disposable fashion means 4,000 rupees ka t-shirt. For me, disposable fashion is what Zara does. for me, a disposable fashion that I should be able to translate latest fashion across the globe to the Indian end consumer at 450 point of sales at a very quickest, at the stealth level. We are trying very hard. We are 100% made in India. And we are absolutely backward integrated company. So for us to communicate to the end consumer becomes slightly more simpler. We sell close to 1,000 pairs every day online, which became a turning point for us. And it really helped us to reach out to the furthest most or the pin codes which we would have never thought of. So for me, communicating to the end consumer and providing the vision and the mission statement of that we will be affordable and disposable fresh fashion. So we have been doing this very successfully, and by God's grace, we have been just awarded the most aspiring brand just 2 weeks back. So I think that we have done a good job, and we have reached where we are trying to reach where we ultimately want to reach for our end consumer.
So it's interesting what Asif just said. He's saying Catwalk has become one of the most aspiring brand. So let me just put a question to the audience. Just name 5 brands which you think have evolved in the last 5 years. Any 5 brands which have really evolved in the last 5 years. Okay. Okay, just flip the question now. Tell me 5 interface which has evolved in the last 5 years. Yeah, interface is everyone from a local banya to a Paytm and so on, and there are tons and tons of them. So clearly and thanks for being so receptive, by the way. But anyway, I think the idea of really posing that was that there are very, very few brands which have really evolved and created a dent. Obviously, Catwalk has been one, but there are very few of them.
How many people you have seen? I've never seen people working towards making a brand. I see today a brand maker getting into distribution. A brand is getting into manufacturing. A manufacturer is getting into making a brand. But there's so much of confusion happening. I don't know why somebody cannot think like what GE thinks. He never said that I'll make cars also. They are so focused. They are so focused on their core competencies. They are so focused on building a brand for themselves. In India, unfortunately, what I see, like China can proudly say, "Mere paas maa hai." We cannot say that we have a Boma also with us. Because we are deviating. I see Indian brands deviating from taking the effort to carry forward this journey of building a brand.
So does that really mean that the age of master brands is well and truly over? That's obviously one question which I would possibly ask Vijay. Is the age of master brands really over? So if one looks at a Xiaomi, which gets launched, and I can pretty much predict that 99% of us had never heard of Xiaomi before it launched. The fact is they took on an Apple, or anyone for that matter, because the platform sold the brand, and not the brand selling on the platform. Or is distribution the new brand? So is local banya actually the new brand that one should really look out for? So is the way our perception of brands, should that evolve and change? And the change will be forced upon because how the markets react on it. So, I'll hand it to Vijay first, and then maybe Karan, you should just throw in some light.
No, I think that's really an interesting question. If you look at it, I think one of the significant shifts over the last few years is been in terms of, if you go back a few years, you can name the most well-known film star, a soap opera which you had. I remember there was a time Hum Log was very large. You watched theaters which had 700, 1200, 1500 people. Now if you go, and most of you must have read The Long Tail, is that you're getting into micro-segmenting of individual consumer behavior. So you have multiplexes, you've got people being serviced at a smaller scale. So I think that's at a consumer behavior, there's a very, very large change. On the other hand, is if you look at it from a distribution point of view, I think there are two interesting things. One is the ability to scale, and like you mentioned, in China, Xiaomi is a great example of a brand's ability to scale. But the larger issue is that if I was to go to any platform, okay, am I buying the platform or am I buying the brand? Okay, so if I was to go, for example, walk into a departmental store, D-Mart or a shopper stop, let's say, for example, I would be buying an underlying brand which I was very comfortable with. Let's say it's Arrow. So shopper stop becomes a place of convenience for me. And therefore, as a brand, if I'm the owner of Arrow, with increasing distribution, I actually benefit. So I think the brand promise is very, very critical. Having said that, based on which category you are, can a brand emerge with this new distribution? And the answer is completely yes. And I'm saying is forget the online world today. If some of you go back, there's a very good brand called Biba. Okay, while Biba was known, I think its largest reach from a brand perspective was really through the distribution of Shoppers Stop. So with these new platforms, do I see the emergence of new brands? Or do I see convenience becoming very large? So today, if you want a cord, you want a mobile charger, do you see that emerging? And the answer is yes. But having said that, I think independent of where you are on the value chain, what brand you are in, I think the brand promise has to be completely true, and the delivery channels will change, the micro segmenting, and therefore the consumer requirements will change. But I think the brand promise is going to be critical.
I'll maybe just add a couple of points to what both Nikhil and Vijay have already mentioned. So Nikhil, you spoke about supply chain and the conventional supply chain that has been set up within the country by brands, and is it being obliterated? To a very large extent, I would agree with that. While this entire investment summit is on consumers, and this entire panel is about customer satisfaction, I think a huge part of customer satisfaction has to be driven by supply chain. While you did see existing forms of supply chain from brands, I think platforms and integrators have the ability to go out and leverage not only existing supply chain, but also have created new supply chain infrastructure of their own, whether you consider what Flipkart has done or what Local Banya is doing. What we're actually going out and now today creating is last mile distribution infrastructure, which the brands had missed out on over the last 20 years. Where online players get to leverage all of this, I think is significant technology advantages, because we are far more technology oriented. And to add to what Vijay was saying, I think so we as Local Banya live in one of the hardest verticals for last mile supply chain execution to the customer. So let me tell you, delivering eggs to bread to frozen products, dairy products, perishable fruits and vegetables, all of that in the same delivery to a customer's door is not easy. And we've literally had to go and create infrastructure right from ground up for ourselves. So when it comes to the question of brand versus platform, I think the ability for platforms to be far more technology advanced, the ability for platforms to leverage the technology that's created across multiple channels of sales and across multiple verticals or categories of sales is where the distinct advantage for a platform does come in vis-a-vis a brand. I think what we should see in the future, and I may cite one great example of this, where Myntra has very recently launched 2 exclusive brands for celebrities in the apparel category. And I think you'll find that that's a perfect integration of brand and platform, where platform has built exclusive brands to leverage more than anything else the technology and supply chain infrastructure that they've created.
Interesting, Karan. If one just takes that and stretches the logic, one looks at, and we can give names, I guess. One looks at Uber or Flipkart, which are fantastic platforms, but the fact is that the product is not owned by them. So Uber has had the legacy issue that one had a few months back. Flipkart, every time they do a bumper sale, they seem to have an issue. So obviously the products are not owned by them, the platform is, but the platform theoretically does not really provide the best consumer experience because you don't control the end product. So as an interface, and which is more relevant for Local Banya right now and maybe Orra at some stage, how does one really get through that challenge where the interface actually can create the brand experience? For citing that, a Local Banya, the interface with a customer like me would be the delivery guy. how do you ensure that that experience would really be a standout, which is a tough one to crack, right?
Sure. I think there are 2 points of interaction with the customer that define the entire user experience for the customer. The first part is the online interface for a platform that is of online nature. And that's the easier controlled experience, but it's also, I think, by far equally critical because it's the first touch point that a customer has with the platform, and therefore first impressions are most often the lasting impressions as well. But the physical touch point, and for a category like ours, is significantly important as well. In our case, what we do is we make sure we control that experience down to the T. So we do not look at outsourcing that to any third-party logistics company or any other service provider. The person who shows up at the door is trained by us, is managed by us, works on our technology platforms. So we've got to make sure that again, because of grocery and the touch and feel factor that customers prefer around grocery. So simple steps like no questions asked return policies in place. Making sure that the person who reaches the door not only has the ability to deliver, but also make sure that all of the quality and service parameters expected by the customer are met before he reaches the door.
Vijay?
So ours is obviously a very emotional category, and research after research seems to suggest that the woman remembers every step on how she bought the jewelry, who she was bought with, what was the entire experience. So I think experience is very, very critical in our category over and above the product. And I think Alok had, in the earlier panel, Alok Nanda had spoken very clearly about the need for the store to speak about who you are and therefore what does it communicate. And for us, I think there was one critical issue is that we are saying is brilliance is our story. We say we are the world's largest diamond manufacturing company. There's an emotional connect, but what does it mean from a product perspective to a consumer? You have the 4 C's, cut, clarity, and all of that. But I think what do you hear a consumer say? And they say that andhere mein bhi mera hira chamakta hai. That's the brand proposition. So how do you bring that alive? So at the store level, it's relatively easy. How do you bring that alive on the online space? Now, I think there's a very interesting research done by BCG Online, which defines category-wise as to how many of the current users are also online. So on the travel categories, as high as 66%. In our category, of every 100 women who buys jewelry, only 44% are online. But increasingly, what we are seeing is online or the digital space where people are using it as research. Fulfillment is very low at 2%, or post-purchase. So I think we've done multiple cases where we've done it online. One is really to say, is this social media, where engagement is very, very high. Because unlike most of the categories here, the frequency of purchase between the first and the second purchase could be very long. So how many of you people have bought a car here recently? So, you're right on the audience part. Okay, so what part is that you will notice a car ad only when you're looking to buy that ad. Which means if I missed out on that ad, you've completely, if you're not looking to buy that ad, you will not see it. So one is to keep them engaged socially. 2 is to, can we bring alive this entire brilliant story online? And we've put several parameters in terms of you can actually see the stone, you can measure its brilliance, all that is being done. So whatever is the brand promise needs to be brought alive in the interface, either as a story through social media or through your own channel.
If people have not raised their hands, they have not bought the car, it is only because it's not on discount now. It's not on discount for quite some time.
No, but interesting, and just to add that, only 1/3 of the people buy online because of it's at a discount. 1/3 buy on because it's a better assortment, and 1/3 buy because of convenience.
It's for jewelry.
No, this is overall. So contrary to what people would believe, only 1/3 people are buying online for price.
When 99 times I buy only because it's on discount.
No, so
I went for a ticket booking right now, just few days back. I wanted to go to, somebody from my office wants to go to Korea. So we booked 3 tickets and we got a 11,000 rupees discount. We bought a coupon from here, we got a coupon from there. We bought, came back, ye kya, wo kya. 3 people different logged in. It took 1.5 hours to save 11,000 rupees. So we did it. What I believe is that it's a matter of convenience. Right now it's like between the brand and the platform, or the platform and the brand. it's like there's a race going on who's first amongst the equal. Both want to say I'm equal, but I want to be first. It's going to get very difficult. It's all about supply chain. Like, it's the brand needs to have a pull and the platform equally needs to have a pull, because without that, it's not going to happen. On the Google day, we sold 8,000 pairs in a day. It was not only possible because Flipkart was doing it or a platform was doing it. It was also because we had a brand pro, and thirdly, we had a supply in place. Xiaomi sold so many because he had believed in that supply chain. I am going to stock that much, and I'm going to sure that I'm going to sell that much. So it's all about, right now, it's all about convenience. And I'll again tell you that what we believe is that it needs to be, the brand pool has to be there, the platform pool has to be there, and of course, please do not forget that right now everybody is riding on the wave of discounts. So the pricing the pricing has to be equally sweet to actually the conversion to take place. Otherwise, I think 33% people will only buy.
So just one quick point on that, and then after that. But Asif, I think most people mistake value proposition versus price. So I can buy, I'm seeing most of you buy a particular shirt. If you were to look at from a price point of view, probably Fashion Street would be the cheapest. Do you necessarily land up buying there? And the answer is no. So I think there's a value proposition for which the customer is very, very important.
I bought the airline, same airline, Air India, for 11,000 rupees less.
So I think to a very large extent, the choice of value proposition, whether it be price, range, or convenience, and I think most online businesses will build their businesses on one of the three value propositions. This is how it's sort of crystallized for local Banya in the near future. Whereas price, we think is a great acquisition strategy for us. Our value proposition for retention cannot be built on price. So price will drive engagement, first-time engagement. Price can drive customer acquisition. But we all want to build businesses based on customer loyalty and customer retention. And that's where I don't think price can engage repeat purchases. Repeat purchases, I think, would largely be driven by convenience factors and by product assortment.
You know, it's interesting. You know, while everyone debates out here, the fact is that pricing is critical. I think that is pretty much paramount, be it for customer acquisition at the first tranche or sustainability, as Asif talks about. Now, it's interesting if you look at price. Now, if price is the driving factor, along with the other couple of attributes, it's also a function of the capital which someone has to give you the price which you want. And it boils down to saying, I'll give you the best price because I've got the largest amount of capital, which will get me the largest amount of customers, which in turn gives me the value as the market, and thereby ability to again price it cheaper, right? Now this cycle is extremely sexy and looks very, very compelling, but it can really break out completely, because while we do all this, and someone like Amazon has done that fantastically in the last 15 years, all it takes is someone like jet.com, and I don't know how many people are aware of this, but there's a new kid on the block which is called jet.com, which is perfectly puncturing whatever Amazon did in the last 15 years. They come with the commitment and the promise to give you anything which Amazon sells at 10% lower pricing. But that's based on a subscription model. So you pay $50 and you get 10% cheaper to Amazon. So fundamentally, whatever Amazon did in 15 years is where jet.com starts off. Now, who knows how long jet.com will live, but it's just an idea, by the way. It is getting implemented as we speak, and it's already raised $150 million. So, you know, the challenge, I guess, and which, you know, I'm sure you would face at some stage, how do you create consumer stickiness to this proposition of, because the consumer came in first into local Banya, or frankly for most platforms that one sees, because of the price engagement that you offered. It wasn't based on variety and service and so on. So, you know, how do you really create consumer stickiness which will last beyond pricing? So I'd also like Sridhar to possibly come into this and
Sure. So see, traditionally we have looked at consumer as an individual, and stickiness is the individual with the product, individual with the store, individual with the website. But today if you see, it is the same consumer with multiple needs. So you're acquiring consumer needs, not necessarily the consumer in its totality. So you may buy a book from Amazon, you may buy a t-shirt from Flipkart. They've not acquired the consumer literally, right? So stickiness, I mean, our view is stickiness of that need if I'm able to capture using a consistent experience which delights him and not just gives him what he wants. I mean, the cliche is that today's customer is like a educated, demanding girlfriend who doesn't have time. Right? So it's educated, so you can't goof around, always demanding for new things. Who doesn't have time means you have to act really fast. So in that scenario, you're expected to delight every moment. And when you're delighting, it's easier to delight one need at a time than the consumer's entire requirement. So if you're getting stickiness right for that one need, maybe you won the first battle. What's your view on that?
I think I completely agree with that, and I think it was the same point that I was trying to drive earlier, where price and discount can be a great acquisition strategy, but to create retention, to create stickiness, it's got to be based on convenience and quality of service, beyond just quality of product as well. It's got to be on range, because if you've got that one product that is hard for a consumer to find in other retail channels, then that customer is loyal to you for life, right? And I think that's what boils down to satisfying that customer's one specific need at a time. And I think that's where most platforms will have to engage and compete over the next 5 to 7 years.
And just on that, to add, the same product can satisfy two needs today in e-commerce. I mean, if you see, I mean, we were working with a UK major who's, I mean, I think the previous panel had a similar person selling frozen yogurts. So frozen yogurt now graduating to a lunch equivalent or a lunch substitute was never thought about in UK, right? Now, that's another need they're capturing. And for that, the delivery pace with that frozenness of the product is a customer experience. So same product.
So let me come to this, and Asif and Vijay, just feel free to comment. If one looks at customer experience and looks at the profile of the businesses that we run today, what is that one factor which has stayed true throughout the lifespan of our business, and which you think will remain true for the next 5-10 years?
It's all going to be about availability. See, what people always, what the time has changed, like Domino's never says I make good pizzas. Domino's says I deliver on time. So availability is going to be a very key factor. And of course, the to follow will be the brand pool, the quality. I mean, this all, previously, quality was optional. Fiat band ho sakti thi. I had a scooter Vespa and I had to kick so much that I looked like a footballer kicking that Vespa of mine. But today, quality is there to stay. So availability will play the most critical part, and you need to be omnipresent. If tomorrow's shoes start selling on television, so I might as well be on television, so I can eventually meet my end consumer everywhere. Means you'll be surprised that we just signed Paytm to sell shoes. Okay. Now Paytm said that we will sell amazing quantities. And we were too hesitant about that. Somebody who's running a bank without actually being a bank, and now he wants to sell shoes also. So we signed Paytm. He's selling 80 pairs a day. So means if I need to be available, if I need to be omnipresent, I would rather be. I don't have those options that nahi main ye nahi karuga, main wo nahi karuga. Or the time is gone, when people were too hesitant. Like when I did the first shop and shop, I was the first person to move into the mall. And people used to laugh, bole, nahi, nahi. I was the first person only to do the ladies' footwear. I was the first person who only thought that you should sell. We never had a high street store. We were the first people to move in with shop and shop. We were the quickest people to move in with online portal. So omnipresence will play the most critical part. We have seen it happening in West. We are seeing it happening in China. And I think this is there to stay.
Absolutely. Just to add to what Asif said, I think it is not a luxury today to be omnipresent. I mean, omni-channel is a jargon thrown everywhere. But it's the same customer base. And unless you have the same level of the brand, the technology-enabled supply chain and psychology applied in each of the channels, you may not survive. Because there's an element which we are all missing, which is the people angle, this, the psychology behind selling. So the experience has that angle as well in all these channels. Whether you start, because I mean, many of the larger players today are saying, I don't want a website, I'll go mobile, right? So you should have that strong technology angle at the back, which understands customers, to ensure that you get the same feel on the mobile with the width of the phones today, right? So it's not a given. I believe it is. It's more like survival. You need to have that, isn't it?
भाई मुझे तो जूता बेचना है, मैं तो जहाँ बिकेगा वहाँ पे बेचूंगा. And I don't have those luxuries of saying that I met Kishore Biyani some time back, and somebody was asking about luxury. वो उसने बोला भाई तू luxury बेच, मैं बहुत बेचूंगा.
So I think I'll add something. So for brands, I think they've got the mandate to be present across all platforms. I think that's what the aspiration will be. For platforms, the aspiration is, again, so I would term availability to the concept of range. So for platforms, the chase is product range. So in turn, most platforms will try and chase more and more brands to add to range. What online can do very, very well and much better than physical supply chain or physical retail networks is the ability to integrate product range onto their portfolio. And as long as you can satisfy one at a time a customer needs and plug in more and more needs for that particular customer, I think that's where platforms have the ability to scale up much, much beyond and faster.
So if you were to ask me what's that one thing, and I think somewhere along all this discussion we forget that it's about consumer delight. That's one thing I believe. And whatever's the brand promise, I'm saying is that I think whatever's true for the brand promise, I think needs to remain. I think while there's a large amount of discussion on need-based and transaction-based, I think really the challenge is how do I own the consumer in the life cycle of that brand? It's possible that during the use of brand, it might be 2 years, 4 years, I might wear a Benetton shirt at a particular stage of my life, I might wear Lacoste at a particular stage of my life and move on, okay? But I'm saying that there's a time span. For a category like jewelry, I think the time span is much larger. So right from the time the kid is born, to marriage, to the anniversary, you know, kids getting... So I think the entire issue is that the life cycle is very critical. Second is in the life cycle is how do I micro-segment that consumer? So my requirement for an engagement ring is very different for the requirement of mine when my daughter is getting married. So I think the question is that micro-segmenting is important in the overall without changing the brand proposition. Let's say for my thing is it's delight, consumer delight. But what I do believe is that technology is going to make a far-reaching change in the way we respond to this delight. And I think if you look at it, for example, what is our biggest disadvantage will actually become our biggest advantage. So let's say, I'll take two examples, one in the jewelry or one is in Fab India. I think both are very similar, okay? Here you're seeing the proliferation of huge stores with large number of designs, but with multiple stores, which means effectively, if I've got 150 or 160 stores in the jewelry space, then that means that to evolve and reduce my risk, I have to have one single design everywhere, which means I need to get into mass scale manufacturing. Now imagine a case where there's a craftsman who's making that one unique piece and is being able to put it on the online platform for a certain segment of people to be able to see and view it. Again, I go back to Alok Nanda's discussion in the earlier session where he talked about luxury segment, consumers being distributed right across. So it is impacting both the consumer and the way we are actually responding to the supply side channel. I would push the envelope a little more and imagine once 3D printers become reality. So then as a retailer, what is it that you're trying to do? Or as a brand, what is a brand proposition? Can the consumer go online? Okay, even let's say you don't have a 3D printer at home. Can I pick up the design and therefore can I be able to supply it within a day, 2 days, 3 days, like some of the online jewelry guys are doing? So I think the value proposition will change dramatically based on technology, but I think the brand promise will remain constant right across.
So brings me to the last question, which I would have for the group. So there is this challenge of being a full stack company and being an interface. The full stack company is obviously something like what Vijay does in Orra, which is pretty much from rough to retail. So from rough diamonds to retail is what Vijay does, possibly what Asif also handles, which is brilliant. It's frankly like what I would call it in the investment world being the Goldman Sachs, which says that, kuch bhi karo, profit system mein hona chahiye. So right from your banking, broking, everything, fund management, everything is pretty much in-house. So you don't really seep out the last dollar of money from the customer. It's pretty much in the family. But the fact is, for full stack companies, it also means that the ability to scale is possibly somewhere limited. Whereas then you have the interface, which is the local Banya and the Paytms and tons of other guys who don't control, who have control over the supply side because there's just a plethora of supply, but they don't own the supply. So the biggest item of cost is what they don't own. And the biggest item of income, which is the customer, is also not owned by them. So rather, that's owned by them. So you don't own the cost, you own the income side of it. So it obviously seems to be the best business to be at. But as we stand today, and the world is changing, do you see a need, and all of us out here, do we see a need to migrate our business model to what possibly worked brilliantly for the last 5 years, 10 years, or for the last couple of years for someone like Local Banya, to changing costs, to saying that we need to change costs to be relevant, we need to change costs to survive. Is that what you would think through?
So let me go at that first, because I'm the neutral guy here. I don't own any brands. So I think and our point is that if we are willing to accept that business models are today becoming amoebic, which takes shape as it can, people are surviving, right? So there are traditional certain brands which may not require significant amount of customer experience, may not. Only with the new generation customer coming in, they may add a top up. They may not migrate literally. But having said that, the e-commerce umbrella, which many of us speak about, has triggered a need for re-evaluating what does customer experience mean? How can I get him to buy more? How can I get him to refer more? So the trigger for, as far as maybe the past 5 years, would have been the e-commerce change in India, whether it be traditional e-commerce or consumer internet. Now in that scenario, if you ask me, if you stick on to your conventional business model and acquire only the old school big fish eat small fish concept, people are derailing. And there's one example of a very famous lingerie brand in India which is not growing. They've been very traditional, the product is brilliant, but they're not willing to adopt any of the channels which we have been speaking here. On the other side, if you look at the acquisitions which all the biggies in India have made in the past 2 years, it has all been in the platform or in the supply chain space, whether it be logistics, they want to give the same customer experience or the better customer experience using specialists. Because I'm an e-commerce company, I'm not a logistics guy. So in that scenario, you are acquiring people who are specialized in reaching the customer better than you, which boils down to I am open to have an amoebic business model. That's what my take on this. But
we come from farm to fork technology. We are like you correctly said. We were the first people to go for absolutely backward integration, and we found that for us to make money tomorrow would be the only way if we are able to extract juice down the line. So, but I'll just like to correct you. You said that you don't own the platform. I don't own the customer also. The customer belongs to Shopperstop. The customer also doesn't belong to me. The customer belongs eventually to, where I just heard somebody saying that it belongs to Flipkart, maybe. So I as a brand, look at myself that I'm conveniently available to everybody's customer. I don't want to, we come from a background that we are about convenience, that if I'm good, yes, I should be available to everybody's platform or everybody's customers. Customer also does not belongs to us. It belongs to eventually the portal. It belongs to maybe to the lifestyle stores. But we as a brand feel that we should be happily and readily available for the end consumer.
So, is this on? Can you hear me? It's working. Yeah. Okay. So I think this question is that, from rough to retail, I think all entrepreneurs or all management need to take a call in terms of what your trade-offs are and what is core which you will not move out from. Okay. So for us, if we say design is core to us, if we say diamond is core to us, those are things we will never outsource. So I think that there is going to be a trade-off to build in efficiency. Second is what we see is the emergence of distribution and alternate distribution channels. And omni-channel to me is the most abused word because everybody adds one more e-commerce channel and believes that, their work is done. Okay? I think the drivers for the online channel is very different. So if you look at a platform, I think the issue is that, let's say a luxury brand wants to come onto a platform like Amazon or Flipkart, would we normally do? The answer is no. When we go to the offline world, I would be on Turner Road, I would be on Hughes Road. So the question is that, is there an opportunity to create adjacency on platforms? And therefore, if you look at the bazaar mentality, why are platforms working so well? It is again the bazaar mentality where it's an aggregator where I can go down and I have multiple choice. So if I create an aggregation point of luxury brands, or whichever category it is, it may be electronics, whatever, I think it can work very well. I think the third one, and who does the customer belong to, like Asif said, is I think a critical question, okay? We are thinking from a very traditional mindset. So who does the customer belong to? It belongs to Orra, because I have his or her data. It belongs to the credit card company, because he has my transaction history. It belongs to the hotel, the Taj, because I am a part of their CRM. The ground reality is with analytics happening today, the customer does not belong to you. And I think one of the biggest revolutionary change which I see on this entire data analytics is that the data belongs to the consumer. His or her profile, so let's say if I'm a consumer who travels, say jet, comes to Bombay thrice a week or once a week, I stay at the Taj, but perhaps I may want to stay at the Oberoi. Who should that data belong to? And I do believe that over a period of time is that from the merchants owning that data, the consumer will decide, especially when you've heard this entire discussion about, the 50% of today online consumers are on the mobile. And that's the direct way to reach. So I think the fundamental change is going to be is that the consumers are going to be driving the process. Is there an opportunity to mine the data and do that? I think huge number of tools are available. And I'm sure most of you have spent a little bit of time on data analytics on that front.
And if we carry on like this, we will not have the next panel coming in. So we've shot up by around 7 minutes anyway. So there are a few questions which I guess can be taken offline. Thanks everyone for being on the panel and sharing your thoughts. Thanks for being there.